Ernest Albert Nielson. This is a tribute to the life and legacy of a grandfather I never met, but by studying his life and reading his poems and other writings, I have come to know and love him so dearly. We hope this video will help you feel the same.
Ernest Albert Nielson was born on May 19, 1893 in Hunter, Utah, to Rasmus Nielson and Anna Charlotte Johansson. He was the youngest of 4 boys with many sisters: Emma, John, Joseph, Annie, Hiram, Vera, Martha, Ivy, and Everine. He worked on the farm with animals and also helped out at his parents' general mercantile and grocery store. He built rope swings and had fun playing games with siblings, cousins, and neighborhood friends. Accidents sometimes happen, and his sister Martha wrote a poem about one. Then came our weekly journey, about 4 hours or more, peddling the eggs and butter collected during the week from the store. Once we had a runaway right on Brigham Street. The horses tore like lightning and broke the wagon complete. Then Ernest, he got thrown out and was hit on the trunk of a tree. There he was, lying unconscious, and his head swelled up like 3. Ernest shared a faith-promoting incident. When he was 10 or 11, he was sent to get a horse so his parents could go to a funeral. The horse was very wild, and after chasing it around the pasture a few times with no success, Ernest knelt down and prayed, after which he arose and walked right up to the horse and caught it. He loved school and learning and was an excellent student with the highest grades in his 8th grade graduating class. In 8th grade, he was the representative at the commencement exercises. He was called to serve in his father's native Denmark from October 1913 to November 1914. Due to World War I, he returned to the States and served in the Eastern States, Northwest Virginia Conference, from October 1914 to November 1915.
His missionary journal entries show his humor and frequent challenges. For instance, on February 13, 1914, he wrote, quote, "Went tracting. One lady said that she was not dumb enough to read them tracts, and another woman blessed me that I might be able to repent and do better," unquote. After he purchased a bicycle, he wrote, on March 16th, quote, "Had some short gospel conversations and then came home in the dark. Run into a pile of rocks and tumbled with my cycle into the ditch. Arrived home at 10:30 after about 35 miles of cycle riding up and down the hills," unquote. On March 19th, he wrote, quote, "Went tracting out to Understead. One wild Indian mission, member of conservative religious sect, flew mad and came after me with a club about 3 inches thick and 3 feet long. I tried to get a word in, but couldn't do it. I turned around and said that was a bright example of Christ's doctrine. Then he dove after me again, raised his club, and pushed me over my cycle with his other fist. I told him to remember that I wasn't a dog, and then like a good boy, I walked away listening to his threats," unquote. On April 6th, he wrote, quote, "President Christopherson told us that if we paid too much attention to the girls, we would have to stay 3 years," unquote. October 2nd, this journal entry went such. "Went down to the suburbs and saw the war fortifications, attended a meeting and spoke a few words of farewell to the saints, admonishing them to live in such a way that they would have claim on the protection of the Lord in time of need. Had a jolly time with the saints, retired at 3 a.m., unquote. Lots of walking or riding the train to get up and down the hills and mountains, often teaching and staying with people in humble circumstances. A journal entry, quote, arose after a most unpleasant night with the fleas, breakfast, then assisted in the hunt for the critters. The commandment, thou shalt not kill, had no application to the fleas that morning. Unquote. Some interesting, quote, West Virginia idioms, unquote, by Ernest and Elder Lund, his companion. When doing something energetically, they are, quote, laying flat and shaking down acorns, unquote. Asked a man about a corn crop, he said, quote, raised a heap, sold a sight, and had a right smart left, unquote. Well, I, quote, reckon we'uns, unquote, better go. A sack of flour is a, quote, poke of meal, unquote. At a revival meeting, they were jumping and yelling and, quote, just cutting the buck, unquote.
Ernest courted and married Lavina Day on September 19, 1917, in the Salt Lake Temple. Their first home was a 2-room apartment in his widowed oldest sister Emma's home. Laverne was born here from 1917 to 1919. Their second home was 2 east rooms in his mother and sister Ivy's home. The rest of the girls were born here: Alta, Lola, Leone, Margine, and Phyllis, from 1920 to 1938. They finally had a home of their own in 1938. This home stayed with Lavina until 1989. Ernest built play equipment for his girls and their friends. 15 to 20 cousins and friends would come over for quote-unquote play nights at the Nielson home 2 to 3 times per week. Ernest was primarily a farmer, even cultivating and harvesting crops from a dry farm across the Salt Lake Valley.
In his 1923 diary, Ernest wrote of some farm robbers to be aware of. For instance, weeds, 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 orchard pests, rats, and mice, animals when allowed to range orchard and crops, procrastination in planting, caring for, and harvesting crops, poor management, idleness or extravagance, or ill health in family or animals.
Margine tells of a day hauling incident. I was on top of the load of hay on the trailer, and Daddy was in the car driving to the barn. The load started to tip. I hollered as loud as I could, and he heard me and stopped. But the load all tipped over. But because he had always taught us that if it started to tip, to lean as far to the other side as we dared, most of the hay fell to the ground before I did. I was unhurt. A bit frightened, but unhurt. Lavina also recalled, one night after dark, soon after we got our Ford, I went up to the dry farm to get Ernest and Earl, my brother. I wasn't used to driving the car, so Mother, Grandma Day, went with me. I didn't really know the way, and there were rocky roads. I got nervous, trying to find them, and didn't know where to go. They had a gun, and when they saw the car lights, they fired some shots to let me know where they were. I didn't hear the shots and couldn't find them, so I turned around and went home, and they had to walk. Alta and Margine learned to drive a tractor, and Lavina even drove it during Ernest's illness. He paid his daughters 10 cents an hour wage for their help, but also rewarded the family with trips to canyons or various towns at holiday or harvest time. Both the work and the family trips helped keep them close together. Besides farming as a major source of income, Ernest also worked as a salesman and manager for Excelsis Cosmetics, a secretary and treasurer for the Federal Land Bank of Berkeley, a salesman for Home and Garden Real Estate Company, an agent for Heber J. Grant and Company, an insurance firm, a carpenter for Remington Small Arms Plant, the Salt Lake Airport, Ryberg Construction Company, and Morrison Merrill Company. William H. Bangerter hired him. Finding expression through the written word was a true gift. Throughout his life, even on his mission, Ernest enjoyed writing about experiences, frustrations, and gospel topics. He wrote 100 gospel themes in verse with supplemental references as a beautiful literary effort to introduce and explore gospel themes. Ernest always served with dedication in his various church callings, including scoutmaster, ward clerk, counselor in the bishopric, and then bishop of the Hunter Ward.
He oversaw the demolition of the old church building and fundraising and partial completion of a new building before he was released. His health was declining as he was suffering from the severe effects of ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, and Ernest was not able to attend the dedication, but he wrote some verse and remarks that were read by his son-in-law, Hugh Sorensen. Quote, "Needless to say, it is one of the keenest disappointments of my life to not be able to be in attendance at this meeting. I wish to thank all for their moral and financial support during the 6 years that I was bishop. I would like to read one verse of an original poem entitled, 'Would You Like to Invest?' Would you like to invest where your earnings stand high? Then contribute your share to a church. 'Tis their character will grow for each dollar you sow with high dividends and gospel research. Your children improve with each dollar you spend to assist a great church on its way. And if financial cost saves a son from the loss, I'm sure you'll agree it did pay."
Ernest Elbert Nielson, born May 19, 1893, in Hunter, Utah. Married to Lavina Day on September 19, 1917. He was the father of 6 daughters. Height, 5'10", weight, 155 pounds, blue eyes, blonde hair. He was a farmer, a salesman, a secretary, a carpenter. He served as a missionary in Denmark and the Eastern States from 1913 to 1915. He served as scoutmaster, ward clerk, teacher, counselor in the bishopric, high councilman, and building committee chairman. He was bishop of the Hunter Ward from 1938 to 1944. He died on January 11, 1948, of muscular atrophy, or ALS. He was a writer, a poet, a humorist, a friend, a health enthusiast, and a gospel scholar.
After focusing on his health and natural medical remedies, Ernest Elbert Nielson died on January 11, 1948, at age 54. He fought his illness with courage, and he endured with patience and ultimately relied on his faith until the end of his life. After a blessing from Elder Spencer W. Kimball, he accepted that he was being called home and said, quote, "I guess it won't be such a bad place where I am going," end quote. His written words remain to teach, inspire, and lift us. May he be remembered, read, and revered always.